she dumped him for being poor. Then he shockingly discovers she's the billionaire's hidden daughter. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The rain came down hard that night, slicing through the quiet streets like cold needles. Ethan Carter stood on the sidewalk, soaked to the bone, the city lights blurring in his eyes as Chloe's words still echoed in his mind. I can't do this anymore, Ethan. I'm tired of being poor. She turned away, her high heels splashing through puddles as she climbed into a sleek black Mercedes waiting by the curb. He didn't move. He just stood there, holding the small silver bracelet he'd saved 2 weeks' salary to buy her. It dangled between his fingers like a question that would never be answered. The car door slammed, and with it, the last piece of his pride seemed to close. Ethan wasn't angry, not even surprised. Maybe he'd seen it coming, the way her smile had turned polite, the way her texts had grown shorter, colder. Still, hearing her say it out loud cut deeper than any lie. He looked down at the bracelet again, its tiny charm reflecting the red glow of the stoplight. Guess even silver's not enough, he muttered under his breath. The rain kept falling, drumming against the hood of his old truck parked nearby. Inside, the seat smelled faintly of motor oil and old leather. His jacket, frayed at the sleeves, patched at the elbows, hung on the passenger seat where Chloe once sat laughing about their future. That future was gone now. The wipers squeaked across the windshield as he drove through the narrow streets toward the garage where he worked part-time. The world outside felt colder than usual, and maybe it wasn't just the weather. At the stoplight, a billboard glowed through the mist, an ad for Hale Industries, the luxury conglomerate that seemed to own half the city. A smiling young woman stared down from the billboard, diamond necklace glinting on her collarbone. Ethan sighed and looked away. People like them didn't live in the same world as him. Not really. He was a man who fixed engines, changed tires, and counted every dollar before buying groceries. She was gone now, off to chase that world of glass towers and perfect smiles. He should have been used to being left behind. But as he pulled into the dimly lit garage, water dripping from his hair, something inside him refused to break completely. One day, he whispered to himself, wiping his hands on a rag. One day I'll be enough. The sound of thunder rolled across the sky, low and distant, as if the city itself was holding its breath. And somewhere out there, miles away, Chloe Hale, her last name unknown to him, sat in the back seat of her father's car, staring out at the same storm, her heart pounding with a guilt she couldn't name. Fate, it seemed, wasn't done with either of them yet. The storm had passed by morning, but the city still looked tired. Puddles mirrored the dull gray sky as Ethan stepped out of his apartment, his jacket still damp from the night before. The small studio smelled faintly of motor oil and coffee, his two constants. He locked the door behind him and walked toward the garage, boots splashing lightly through the water. Inside the garage, the familiar hum of machines greeted him. It was quiet except for the occasional metallic clang of tools and the low sound of a radio playing old rock songs. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and checked the time, 7:30. He had another 12-hour shift ahead. It was not glamorous, but it kept the lights on. His boss, Frank, an older man with a kind face and a cigarette always dangling from his lips, looked over from the back. "Rough night?" Frank asked. Ethan forced a smile. "Something like that." Frank nodded, not prying further. He had seen that look before, the kind of heartbreak that no amount of grease or hard work could wash away. As the hours passed, Ethan found comfort in the rhythm of his work. The hiss of the air compressor, the weight of a wrench in his hand, the scent of gasoline, it was all familiar, grounding. But every now and then his mind drifted back to her. Chloe. The way she laughed, the way she said his name, the way she used to wait for him outside the garage, coffee in hand. He could still hear her voice from the night before, sharp and final. "I need a future, Ethan. Love does not pay the bills." He had not realized how heavy those words were until now. At lunch, he sat on the steps behind the garage, unwrapping a peanut butter sandwich. His phone buzzed a notification from the bank. Another overdue notice. He sighed and shoved it back into his pocket. Across the alley, a group of kids kicked a ball against a brick wall, their laughter echoing through the narrow street. For a moment, Ethan smiled. Then his eyes fell on the bracelet again, still tucked in his jacket pocket. He turned it over in his hand, tracing the tiny engraving he had made himself. To brighter days. It was supposed to be a promise. Now it was just metal. He slipped it back into his pocket, almost angrily, as if hiding it would make the ache disappear. That evening he visited his mother at the nursing home. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. His mother, thin but cheerful, looked up from her knitting when he entered. "You look tired, sweetheart," she said softly. "Work," he replied, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "And life," she chuckled. "Both of those can be heavy, but you have a good heart, Ethan. That is what matters." He smiled faintly. "A good heart doesn't pay for your medicine, Mom." She reached out, placing her frail hand over his. "Maybe not, but it keeps you human." He looked away, blinking back the weight in his chest. Before leaving, he fixed the broken clasp on her necklace, small, silver, shaped like a leaf. His fingers were steady despite the fatigue. "There," he said, "good as new." She smiled. "You get that patience from your father." Outside, night had fallen again. The city buzzed softly under the streetlights. Ethan climbed into his truck and sat in silence, the bracelet glinting faintly in the dashboard light. Somewhere across town, in a penthouse high above the streets, Chloe stared out at the same skyline, her reflection shimmering in the glass. She held a diamond bracelet in her hand, but somehow it did not feel like luxury. It felt like guilt. Neither of them knew that their worlds were about to collide again, in a way neither could have imagined. The night was colder than usual, the kind of cold that cut through even the thickest jacket. Ethan had stayed late at the garage, finishing up a repair for a customer who needed the car by morning. The clock on the wall read almost midnight when he finally closed up shop. His muscles ached, and his hands were stained with grease. He tossed the rag onto the counter, grabbed his keys, and stepped outside. The street was empty, the hum of the city replaced by the occasional sound of tires hissing over wet pavement. He climbed into his old pickup truck, the engine coughing to life after a few stubborn turns of the key. As he pulled out onto the main road, the sky above him flashed with distant lightning. Rain started to fall again, tapping against the windshield in uneven rhythms. Ethan switched on the wipers and leaned forward, his eyes squinting through the blur. He was halfway across the bridge when it happened. A sleek black car sped past him, too fast for the slick roads. He caught only a glimpse of the taillights before the vehicle lost control, fishtailing violently, slamming into the guardrail, and skidding across the lane. Time seemed to slow. Without thinking, Ethan slammed the brakes, his heart pounding. The car spun once, twice, then crashed through the barrier with a deafening crunch, plunging halfway down the embankment. He could hear the distant sound of the horn blaring, echoing across the river. Ethan jumped out of his truck, rain soaking him instantly. "Hey, is anyone in there?" he shouted, running toward the wreck. The car's front end was crumpled against a concrete post, steam rising from the shattered hood. He tried the driver's door, but it was jammed shut. Through the broken glass, he saw a woman slumped over the steering wheel. Blood streaked down her forehead, her hair wet and tangled. Ethan's pulse raced. He kicked at the window once, twice, until the glass shattered. Carefully, he reached inside, unlocking the door from within. "Hey, stay with me," he said, his voice steady but urgent. She groaned faintly, her face barely visible through the rain. He unbuckled her seatbelt and lifted her out, cradling her against his chest as the sirens of distant traffic wailed faintly in the background. She was freezing, her pulse weak but steady. He carried her to his truck, laying her gently across the seat. For a moment, the dashboard light fell on her face, and his breath caught. "Chloe?" The name slipped out before he could stop it. It was her. The woman who had walked away from him days ago. The woman who said love could not buy a future. Now she was broken, unconscious, and bleeding in his arms. Ethan froze, torn between disbelief and a surge of something deeper, something like fear and instinct all at once. "Come on, Chloe, stay with me," he whispered, starting the truck again. He drove fast, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Every second felt like a battle. The hospital lights glowed in the distance like a beacon. When he pulled up to the emergency entrance, he jumped out and shouted for help. Nurses and paramedics rushed out with a gurney. "Car accident on the bridge," he managed to say, his voice hoarse. They took her from his arms, disappearing through the sliding doors. Ethan stood in the rain, watching as the red light above the ER entrance flickered on. His chest heaved, his breath visible in the cold air. He was soaked, trembling, and silent. The world around him blurred again, just like the night she left him. But this time, it was not heartbreak that filled his chest. It was fear. He leaned against the truck, rain dripping from his hair, whispering softly to himself, "Do not die on me, Chloe. Not like this." The city kept moving, oblivious, as the storm swallowed the night. Hours later, the storm had quieted into a soft drizzle, leaving the city washed and eerily still. Inside the hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as Ethan sat in the waiting area, his wet clothes clinging to his skin. The clock on the wall read 3 in the morning. His hands were still trembling, his mind looping through the image of Chloe's face, pale and still in his arms. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. "Sir, are you the one who brought in the woman from the bridge?" Ethan stood quickly. "Yes. How is she?" The nurse gave him a tired smile. "She is stable. A mild concussion, a few stitches, and some bruised ribs. She was lucky." Ethan exhaled, the breath he had been holding finally escaping. "Can I see her?" "She is resting. Family will be notified soon, but if you want to wait, the doctor might allow a short visit." He nodded, sinking back into the chair. The waiting room was nearly empty now, the only sound the distant hum of a vending machine. He rubbed his hands together for warmth, his thoughts tangled. He had not planned to see her again, not like this. When the doctor finally appeared, Ethan stood. "She is asking for you," the man said, adjusting his glasses. "Just for a few minutes." Ethan followed him down a quiet hallway. The steady beeping of machines filled the air. He hesitated at the doorway before stepping inside. Chloe lay on the hospital bed, a thin blanket pulled up to her chest, her face pale but peaceful. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of his footsteps. "Ethan?" Her voice was weak but clear. He moved closer, unsure if he should smile or stay silent. "You are in the hospital," he said softly. "You lost control on the bridge." She blinked, trying to piece together the memory. "You saved me?" He nodded. "It was nothing." "It was everything," she whispered. Her gaze dropped to his soaked jacket, the grease stains still faintly visible. For the first time, her voice trembled. "After everything I said to you, after how I treated you, do not," he interrupted gently. "It does not matter right now." She tried to sit up, wincing in pain. "Why did you help me?" Ethan looked at her, the answer simple yet heavy. "Because it was the right thing to do." She turned her face away, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. "You should hate me." "Maybe I should," he said quietly, "but I do not." The room was silent except for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Chloe reached for her wrist, realizing the silver bracelet he had once given her was missing. "The bracelet," she murmured. Ethan pulled it from his pocket, the metal still cold from the rain. "You still had it," she said, surprised. "Some things are hard to throw away," he replied. He placed it gently on the table beside her bed. "Rest, Chloe. The doctor said you need it." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Ethan, thank you." He looked back once, giving her a faint nod before walking out. In the hallway, he paused, pressing his palms to his face. He could still feel the weight of her in his arms, the sound of her breathing shallow but alive. Outside, the dawn was breaking, casting a pale gold light through the hospital windows. As he stepped out into the cool air, he saw a black limousine pull up to the entrance. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, flanked by 2 security guards. His expression was sharp, powerful, familiar from the billboards that towered over the city. Richard Hale, the billionaire head of Hale Industries. He brushed past Ethan without a glance, heading straight inside. Ethan stood frozen, the realization slowly dawning. Chloe Hale. He whispered her full name for the first time, and the truth hit him like a punch. The woman he had saved, the woman who once left him for being poor, was not just anyone. She was the daughter of one of the richest men in the country. And suddenly, everything made sense. Ethan did not sleep that morning. He drove aimlessly through the city as the sun climbed over the skyline, his thoughts heavy and scattered. The name echoed in his head again and again, Chloe Hale. It made sense now. The expensive dresses, the private car, the way she had always flinched when money came up in conversation. He had loved her, truly, but he had never known who she really was. When he finally pulled into the garage, Frank was already there, leaning against the workbench with a cup of coffee. "You look like you wrestled a tornado," Frank said. Ethan gave a tired smile. "Something like that." He wanted to explain, but how could he? How could he say that the woman he loved, the one who had left him for being poor, was the billionaire's daughter he had just saved from dying on the bridge? He grabbed a wrench and started working, letting the clang of metal drown out his thoughts. But the image of Chloe's pale face kept breaking through the noise. Hours later, as he wiped his hands and prepared to close the shop, a shadow appeared at the entrance. He turned and froze. Chloe stood there, wearing a simple coat, her hair tied back. Her driver waited by the car behind her, but she looked like she had walked the last mile alone. "Chloe," Ethan said, startled. "You should be resting." "I needed to see you," she said quietly. "May I come in?" He nodded, stepping aside. The smell of oil and steel filled the air as she walked inside. Her eyes wandered over the messy tools and spare parts, settling on the small radio playing softly in the corner. "It has not changed," she murmured. "Neither have I," he replied. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "My father told me what you did. He wanted to send money, a reward." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I do not want his money." "I told him that," she said, a faint smile crossing her lips. He was not happy about it. Ethan crossed his arms. "Why are you here, Chloe?" She hesitated before answering. "Because I needed to thank you, and because there are things I should have said before I walked away." Her voice trembled slightly. "When I left, it was not because I stopped caring. It was because I was scared. My father has always decided everything for me, who I date, what I study, even what I wear. When I fell in love with you, it was the first thing that was mine, and it terrified me." Ethan looked down, his hands tightening around the rag he was holding. "You did not trust me enough to stay." "I know," she whispered, "and I have regretted it every day since." For a long moment there was only the sound of rain tapping on the roof. Then Ethan said softly, "You had everything, Chloe. You could have told me." "I wanted to," she said, her eyes glistening. "But I thought you would hate me if you knew who I really was." "You were wrong," he said, his voice low. "I would not have cared about your last name. I cared about you." She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Do you still?" Ethan met her gaze, the air between them thick with memories and silence. "I do not know," he said honestly. "I do not know what is real anymore." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the bracelet he had left by her hospital bed. "Then start here," she said, holding it out to him. "Start with this. It means something to both of us." Ethan looked at it but did not take it. "It used to," he murmured. "Now it is just a reminder of how different our worlds are." Chloe's eyes filled with tears. "Maybe they do not have to be." He shook his head slowly. "You should go, Chloe. Your father is waiting." She hesitated, then turned toward the door. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." When the door closed behind her, the sound lingered like a heartbeat in the quiet room. Ethan stood there, staring at the bracelet she had left on the table, the small silver charm glinting in the fading light. He exhaled slowly, whispering to himself, "Some things never change." Outside, Chloe climbed into the car, her reflection trembling in the rain-streaked window. She looked back once, but Ethan was already gone from view. The following week moved in slow motion for Ethan. The garage felt quieter, emptier, as if the hum of engines could no longer drown out his thoughts. Every morning, he caught himself glancing toward the road, half expecting her car to appear again. But Chloe never came back. Life, as it always did, kept moving. He fixed cars, paid bills, and visited his mother on Sundays. Yet deep down, something had shifted. He had seen the truth of her world, the world of penthouses and power, and realized how far apart they really were. Across town, in a glass tower that stretched above the clouds, Chloe sat in her father's office. Richard Hale stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "You disobeyed me," he said, his voice cold and steady. "You were told to stay away from that mechanic." Chloe swallowed hard. "He saved my life, Dad. You could at least thank him." Richard turned sharply. "I already did." A financial reward was more than enough. He did not want your money. "Of course he did not," Richard snapped. "Men like him never do at first. But they always come back when reality hits." "You are wrong about him," she said quietly. "You do not know him." Richard's eyes narrowed. "And you do?" The silence stretched between them. "You think he loves you? He loved the version of you that you let him see. If he knew who you truly were, he would resent you for the rest of his life." Chloe blinked back tears, her heart pounding. That is not true. It is the truth that keeps this family safe, he said firmly. You will not see him again. Am I clear? She wanted to argue, to scream, but she knew it would be useless. Her father had built his empire on control of companies, of people, of emotions. That night, she stood on the balcony of her penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly below. The silver bracelet gleamed in her hand. She had thought distance would protect him, but instead, it only hurt more. The rain began to fall again, soft and familiar, and for a brief moment, she wished she could be anywhere but there. Meanwhile, Ethan was closing up the garage when two men in dark suits appeared. Ethan Carter? One of them asked. Yes, he replied cautiously. Mr. Hale would like a word. Ethan frowned. Richard Hale? That is correct. He sent a car. The ride to the Hale Tower was silent. Ethan sat stiffly in the back seat, staring out at the glowing skyline. When they reached the lobby, marble floors stretched out like mirrors. The elevator doors opened to reveal Richard Hale himself, standing beside a long conference table. Mr. Carter, Richard said with a thin smile, please, sit. Ethan remained standing. You did not have to send men to drag me here. I needed to ensure you would come, Richard said calmly. I owe you thanks for saving my daughter. You already said that, Ethan replied. What do you really want? Richard's smile faded. I want you to understand your place. Whatever connection you think you have with Chloe ends here. You have nothing to offer her, Mr. Carter. My daughter deserves stability, not sentiment. Ethan clenched his fists. With all due respect, sir, that is for her to decide. Richard stepped closer, his voice dropping. You think love can fix everything? Love does not pay for the world she lives in. Walk away before you destroy both your lives. Ethan met his gaze steadily. You are right. I have nothing compared to you. But I did not save her because of who she was. I saved her because it was the right thing to do. That is something money cannot buy. For the first time, Richard's expression faltered, but only for a second. You have until tomorrow to disappear from her life, he said coldly. Do not test me. The guards escorted Ethan out. As the elevator doors closed, Ethan caught one last glimpse of the city lights reflected in the glass. They looked beautiful from up high, but all he could think about was how far down he truly stood. When he stepped outside, the night air hit his face like a wake-up call. He had just stared power in the eye and walked away. But deep inside, he knew it was not over. Not yet. The next morning, Ethan woke with a dull ache in his chest that no amount of sleep could fix. He sat at the edge of his bed, the early light spilling through the blinds, painting lines across the floor. The conversation with Richard Hale replayed in his mind, word for word. You have nothing to offer her. It had been meant as an insult, but the truth was, it stung because part of him believed it. He looked around his small apartment, the worn-out couch, the cracked coffee mug on the counter, the faded photograph of him and his mother on the shelf. What could he possibly give a woman who had everything? Still, something inside him refused to back down. He drove to the garage, trying to bury himself in work, but his hands kept shaking every time he picked up a tool. Frank noticed. You are somewhere else today, the older man said, setting down his wrench. Trouble? Ethan gave a short laugh. You could say that. Is it about the girl? Ethan looked up, surprised. Frank shrugged. You forget, kid. I have been around long enough to know the look of a man fighting with his heart. Ethan sighed. She is not just any girl. She is Chloe Hale. Frank's eyebrows lifted slightly. As in Hale Industries? Ethan nodded. Her father called me in last night, told me to stay away from her. Frank let out a low whistle. And what are you going to do? I do not know, Ethan said honestly. Part of me wants to walk away. The other part cannot. Frank studied him for a moment. Then maybe you should stop thinking about what you deserve and start thinking about what is right. Those words lingered long after Frank walked away. That evening, Ethan drove out of the city, the road winding toward the cliffs overlooking the bay. The same bridge where he had saved her loomed in the distance. The rain had washed away the skid marks, but the memory was still vivid, the sound of metal twisting, the flash of her hair, the weight of her in his arms. He leaned against the railing, the wind cold against his face. Maybe this is where I leave it, he muttered to himself. Maybe this is where I let her go. His phone buzzed in his pocket. An unknown number flashed on the screen. He hesitated before answering. Ethan Carter? The voice was low, familiar, and trembling slightly. Chloe? Yes, she said quickly. I do not have much time. I know my father spoke to you. He did, Ethan said. He made himself very clear. Then please, listen to me before you decide anything. My father has a charity gala tomorrow night, one he hosts every year. He wants to make it look like everything in our family is perfect, like nothing ever goes wrong. I am supposed to smile, pose for photos, and pretend I am fine, but I am not. I need you to come. Ethan frowned. Why me? Because I cannot keep pretending, Ethan. Because the only time I ever felt real was when I was with you. Her words hung in the air like a challenge and a confession all at once. You do not have to talk to him. You do not even have to stay long. Just be there. Ethan hesitated, his heart pounding. If I come, it will not change anything. Maybe not, she said softly, but maybe it will change me. The line went quiet, and then she whispered, please. When the call ended, Ethan stood there for a long time, the wind whipping around him. He looked out over the water, the city lights reflecting like broken stars. He knew showing up would stir trouble. He knew Richard Hale would hate it. But something deeper, something he could not name, told him he had to go. The next night, the Hale Foundation's charity gala filled the ballroom of the Grand Regency Hotel with crystal lights and the low hum of violins. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and the city's most powerful people laughed as if the world outside did not exist. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Chloe stood at the top of the grand staircase, her eyes scanning the crowd, searching for one face she was not sure would come. The ballroom shimmered beneath golden chandeliers, the sound of soft laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. Waiters weaved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne, while a string quartet played an elegant tune that seemed to belong to another world. Chloe stood near the grand staircase, her gown a deep shade of emerald that caught the light every time she moved. To everyone else, she looked perfect, composed, graceful, the very image of the Hale legacy. But behind her calm smile, her heart raced. Every minute that passed without seeing him felt like a quiet defeat. Her father's voice echoed somewhere across the room, speaking to investors, shaking hands, performing his usual charm. Chloe's eyes darted toward the doors again. Maybe he would not come. Maybe she had asked too much. Just as that thought began to sink in, the doors at the far end of the ballroom opened, and Ethan stepped inside. He wore his only suit, simple but clean, his shoulders squared despite the weight in his chest. For a moment, he hesitated at the threshold, feeling every gaze turn toward him. He did not belong here, and he knew it. But then his eyes found hers. Chloe froze, her breath catching in her throat. Around her, the chatter faded into a dull hum. Without thinking, she started down the staircase, her heels clicking softly against the marble. When she reached him, neither spoke for a long moment. You came, she finally whispered. You asked, he said simply. Before they could say more, a voice cut through the crowd. Ethan Carter, Richard Hale announced, his tone smooth but edged with disdain. The guests turned, curious, as the billionaire strode forward. I must admit, I did not expect you to show up tonight, Ethan straightened. I was invited. Richard's smile did not reach his eyes. Yes, by my daughter, against my advice. You have made quite a name for yourself this week, Mr. Carter. The press loves a good hero story. Ethan's jaw tightened. I did not save her for attention. No, Richard said, circling him like a predator. You saved her because you thought it would change something between you. But let me be clear, it will not. You are not part of this world. Maybe not, Ethan replied, his voice steady. But your daughter is more than this world, and you are too blind to see it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Chloe stepped forward. Dad, stop. But Richard ignored her. You think love makes you equals? Love does not build empires. It does not protect you when the world turns cruel. Ethan met his gaze without flinching. No, but it makes all of that worth surviving. The room went silent. Chloe looked between them, tears glimmering in her eyes. For the first time, Richard faltered, his expression cracking just slightly. Chloe turned toward the crowd, her voice trembling but clear. My father is right about one thing. This world is cruel. But not because of people like Ethan, because of people who think kindness is weakness. The photographers were already snapping pictures, flashes lighting up the walls. Richard's advisors whispered urgently in his ear, but he stayed silent. Chloe reached for Ethan's hand, holding it in plain view of everyone. I am done hiding who I am, she said. And I am done pretending love is something to be ashamed of. The applause started small, hesitant, then grew louder until it filled the ballroom. Richard turned away, his jaw tight, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. As the music resumed, Chloe leaned closer and whispered, "You should probably dance with me before he changes his mind." Ethan smiled faintly. "I do not know how to dance like these people." "Then just hold me," she said softly. And he did. Under the golden light, surrounded by the same people who once whispered about status and wealth, a mechanic and a billionaire's daughter moved together as if no one else existed. For the first time in a long while, the world felt right. Weeks passed after the gala, but the night lingered in every headline and every whispered conversation across the city. The billionaire's daughter and the mechanic who saved her. It was the story no one could stop talking about. Some called it scandalous, others called it romantic. But for Chloe and Ethan, it was simply real. She had not seen her father since that evening. The Hale Tower had gone quiet, its glass walls now feeling more like a cage than a home. Yet for the first time in her life, Chloe felt free. She moved out of the penthouse and rented a modest apartment downtown, where the noise of the streets reminded her that she was finally living her own life. Ethan helped her move, their laughter filling the small space as they unpacked boxes and old memories together. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, placing a stack of books on the shelf. "Leaving all of that behind?" Chloe smiled softly. "It was never really mine to begin with." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, seeing not the daughter of a billionaire, but the woman he had always known, the one who cared, who dreamed, who had learned to fight for what mattered. Life did not magically become easy. Ethan still worked long hours at the garage, and Chloe started volunteering at a foundation for accident survivors, using her influence quietly, without her father's name attached. Their days were simple, but they were theirs. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the city in shades of gold and fire, Ethan closed the garage early and told Chloe to meet him by the bridge, the same one where everything had changed. When she arrived, he was standing by the railing, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, the wind tugging at his hair. "You always pick dramatic locations?" she teased gently. "I guess I have a thing for bridges," he said, smiling. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small silver bracelet, the one that had followed them through every chapter of their story. "I fixed the clasp," he said quietly. "Thought you might want it back." She looked down at the bracelet resting in his palm, then up at him. "You keep fixing things that are broken." "Not everything," he said softly. "Some things you just have to start over." Chloe took the bracelet and fastened it around her wrist. "Then let us start over." For a moment, the world went still. The sound of the river below, the faint hum of the city, the glow of the streetlights, all of it seemed to fade until there was only them. Ethan reached for her hand, his voice steady but tender. "I do not have much, Chloe. No grand house, no fortune. But I promise you one thing, whatever I build, I will build it with you." Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was bright. "That is all I ever wanted." He laughed softly. "You sure?" "Because I am a terrible dancer, and I burn toast." She laughed through her tears. "I guess we will survive." He slipped a simple silver ring onto her finger, one he had made himself from a scrap of metal polished to shine. It was not gold or diamond, but it gleamed like truth. "This is not much," he said, "but it is honest. It is perfect," she whispered. They stood there as the wind swept around them, the city lights shimmering on the water below. In that quiet moment, it did not matter where they had come from or what they had lost. All that mattered was what they had found each other. And miles away, in an office filled with silence, Richard Hale stared at a photograph from the gala. His daughter, smiling with a man who refused to bow to power. For the first time in years, he felt something close to pride. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he had not used in a long time. When Chloe answered, his voice was softer than she remembered. "You were right," he said. "Kindness is not weakness." She smiled, glancing at Ethan beside her. "I know, Dad." As the call ended, Ethan looked out over the city, his arm around her shoulders. "Strange how life works," he murmured. "You save someone once, and somehow, they end up saving you right back." And with that, the night closed around them, warm and still, two souls finally at peace with the world and with each other.